While I was going about my chores, I heard my father-in-law's voice coming from the venue, shouting, "Why isn't Emily here?" Deciding I should at least greet him, I headed towards the venue. As I approached, I overheard my husband and mother-in-law laughing and saying things to my father-in-law like, "If you're referring to that dirty woman, we've got her working in the back. Don't mess with me. What do you think a wife is for?" My name is Emily. I'm a 23-year-old office worker, currently dating a guy named Steve. Our meeting was quite unusual. I was living alone, and he was in the apartment next door. One day, while I was off from work, I heard a loud noise coming from his apartment. I wondered if he had hit the wall, as I wasn't being particularly noisy, just had the TV on at a low volume. Feeling uneasy, I started to think that someone might have fallen. Concerned, I rang his doorbell, but there was no answer. I tried again, and after a moment, I heard a faint voice asking, "Who is it? Are you all right?" Eventually, the door opened. When the door opened, a man swayed on his feet, looking as if he might collapse. "Are you okay?" I asked. The man leaned against the door, looking dazed. "I'm starving," he said weakly. "What? I haven't eaten anything in days," he added, his voice barely audible. I quickly hurried back to my apartment and rummaged through my fridge, finding a sandwich and some tea I had saved from yesterday. I returned to his room. "Here, you can have this if you want." "Ah, are you sure?" "I'd be more worried if you starved to death," I replied. "Thank you so much," he said, gratefully taking the food. He devoured the sandwich in no time and gulped down the tea with a relieved sigh. "Thanks for the meal. I honestly thought I was going to pass out. I'll definitely pay you back for the sandwich." "No need to worry about it, it's not a big deal, but why haven't you eaten for so long?" "After paying for tuition and rent, I ran out of money." "So you're a student?" "Yeah, I'm a senior in college." "Don't you have a part-time job?" "Well, the pub where I worked suddenly shut down." "That's awful." "Yeah, I didn't get paid, and everything went downhill really fast." "Have you talked to your parents about this?" "I don't want to worry them." "I understand, but you should tell them. It's dangerous to let yourself go hungry like this, like you are now." "You're right, I'll be more careful." Just then, his stomach growled loudly. "Oh," I said, trying not to laugh, "you must be really hungry. It's not healthy to go without food for so long." I decided to offer him some of my homemade cooking. He hesitated, but I insisted, saying it would be a problem if he collapsed from malnutrition. So, I invited him to my room and served him some fried rice. "This is delicious. It's been ages since I had food this good," he said, eating with the enthusiasm of a child, which was so endearing it stirred my maternal instincts. We introduced ourselves and exchanged contact information, and I told him to reach out if he ever needed help. It wasn't long before he found another part-time job and managed to get a position at a restaurant that provided free meals. "Thanks to you, I won't starve," he said gratefully. "I'm glad to hear that," I replied. Recently, I'd started cooking a bit extra and inviting him over to share meals. Eating alone had become lonely, so having someone to dine with was a welcome change. One day, as I was reflecting on how much I enjoyed our time together, he suddenly grew serious. "What's wrong?" I asked, a bit anxious. He swallowed hard and said, "Emily, would you go out with me?" "Huh? I know I'm just a poor college student and probably not the best match for you, but I've fallen for you." His straightforwardness caught me off guard. The truth was, I was also attracted to him, so I accepted his offer. "I like you too, Steve." His face lit up with joy, and just like that, we began dating. We enjoyed discussing which room to hang out in, given that we lived next door to each other. Our relationship continued to blossom smoothly, and after Steve graduated and found a job, we decided to move into a larger apartment together. Although we had been living almost like a couple already, we thought sharing a bigger space would help us both with the rent. We continued our relationship and got married when I was 26 and he was 25. Even though we were still living in the same apartment, our lifestyle didn't change much after marriage. However, one significant change was the increased involvement of Steve's mother, who became my mother-in-law. While we hadn't interacted much with her before, she started visiting frequently after our marriage. "Emily, do you even clean the room properly?" she scolded one day. "Huh? Look at all this dust. I can't reach that high, and I don't have time to clean there after work. What? You're talking back to your mother-in-law. You're a cheeky wife. I'm just saying I can't do what's physically out of reach. You're full of excuses. I can't believe Steve married someone like you. That's my mother-in-law, taking every opportunity to berate me. Since I left for work earlier and returned before Steve, she would relentlessly criticize me until he came home. I continued with the housework, hoping he would arrive soon. What are you making? My mother-in-law asked, peering into the kitchen. Huh? I'm grilling fish. Steve won't be satisfied with that. You should make something more elaborate, like a meat dish. Mother-in-law, what are you doing? To my shock, she threw the grilled fish I had prepared straight into the trash. I can't believe I left daily cooking to you. From now on, I'll take over. But if you cook every day, that means you'll be here all the time. I don't want that at all, Steve chimed in, looking uneasy. There's no need for that, mother-in-law. I can handle the cooking, I said, trying to stay calm. No, I don't trust you. I'll come and cook every day, she insisted. Just then, Steve walked in. Without even consulting me, he said, "Oh, you're going to help with housework, Mom? That's great, please do." Huh, I was taken aback by his decision. "I'm looking forward to cooking with you, Emily," she said with a triumphant smile. From that moment on, it was a nightmare. She got a key from Steve and began coming over daily, waiting for me to come home from work. Late again, don't just leave everything to me because I'm cooking. You need to start cleaning now, my mother-in-law demanded. Despite being exhausted from work, she insisted that I do housework. Even though it wasn't particularly dirty, she watched my every move, and if I took a break, she would scold me mercilessly. I had no choice but to clean, which only made me more tired. She came over every day to cook and joined us for dinner, often criticizing me in front of Steve, calling me useless. "Don't cause trouble for Mom," Steve said, blaming me instead of addressing his mother's behavior. Since his father was working abroad, his mother had the freedom to visit us frequently. She also started pressuring us about having a child. "There's nothing better than having a child. Hurry up and have one or two," she said. "Even if you say that, it's not something we can just rush. We have to wait," I explained. Really, young people these days always have excuses. I had Steve right after I got married. Huh? It's because you're working, that's why. What? I was a housewife, so I could start having children right away. What kind of logic is that? If you properly support your husband, you'd have more time for children. You're too tired from work. That's a cruel thing to say. I don't think it's related to that. Shut up. If you don't get pregnant soon, we'll find another wife. Another wife? Of course, a woman who can't have children has no value. That kind of discriminatory attitude is unacceptable. You're always arguing back. I'll tell Steve, she said, her face turning red with anger. It was ironic, as she was the one constantly arguing. As soon as Steve came home, his mother informed him of the incident. "Emily, did you talk back to my mom? What were you thinking?" Steve's anger was immediate when he heard his mother's account. "Are you seriously blaming me for us not having children?" I asked, shocked. "There's no way it's my fault. What are you talking about?" Steve insisted. I was growing increasingly frustrated with my husband's unwavering support for his mother. The idea of divorce crossed my mind. Then, my husband's grandmother, who had been hospitalized, passed away. Despite my plans, I had to attend the funeral. However, Steve and his mother told me, "Don't come here, just prepare things in the back." Reluctantly, I made tea and handled chores in the back. I decided I would leave my husband once the funeral was over. As I worked, I heard raised voices from the main venue. "Why isn't Emily here?" I recognized my father-in-law's voice. It seemed he had returned from his overseas business trip. I decided to at least greet him and headed to the venue. As I approached, I overheard Steve and his mother, smirking, say, "It's clear she's not family. We've got that dirty woman working in the back." Their blatant disregard was astonishing. Moments later, my father-in-law's angry voice cut through the room. "Are you kidding me? What do you think a wife is for?" Steve and his mother were visibly shocked by his outburst. "What's your problem?" Steve asked. Yeah, you really took us by surprise, his mother added. I'm appalled that you both think like this. I'm going to call Emily, my father-in-law said, his voice firm. I made my way to where they were gathered. Father-in-law, it's been a while. Yes, I was surprised. Emily, did you hear all that? Yes, I replied. As I entered, my mother-in-law and Steve glared at me with disdain. Emily, have you been mistreated by my son and wife? My father-in-law asked. I nodded. Yes, she comes to the house almost every day to complain about me, and Steve joins in to blame me. When I spoke up, my father-in-law glared at his wife and son. You two are the worst. Have some shame, he said. Steve immediately argued back. What? Are you saying I'm like my father? What have we done that's so terrible? It's astonishing how you don't see your own faults. My mother, your grandmother, was constantly troubled by her own mother-in-law. I vowed not to repeat those mistakes when I became a father-in-law. I never bullied her. Do you have any negative memories of my mother? Well, that's true. Still, you're the one bullying Emily and causing her distress. What nerve do you have? Because this woman won't give us a grandchild. A child is a blessing. Just because you had children early doesn't mean you should force that on your daughter-in-law. You're both hopeless. My father-in-law turned to me and asked, Emily, what do you want to do? Do you want to continue your marriage with my son? Hey, Dad, what are you saying? Steve was visibly flustered. Ignoring Steve, I looked at my father-in-law and said, I want a divorce. Emily, are you serious? Your mother-in-law told me that if we can't have a child, I should find another wife. Wait a minute, Emily, what are you saying? Steve demanded. I can't be with a mother-in-law who says such things, and I'm fed up with a husband who blames me instead of defending me. I'm determined to divorce him. My father-in-law nodded approvingly. I think that's a good idea. If you're going to divorce, there's no need for you to help with this funeral anymore. Emily, thank you for everything up to now. You can go home and start packing your things. Thank you. I'm glad I could speak with you, father-in-law. With that, I left the venue. My husband and mother-in-law looked pale, and since their conversation had been overheard by all the relatives, news of their bullying spread quickly, and they were met with cold stares from everyone. With my father-in-law's support, I officially divorced my husband. It turned out that my father-in-law was so appalled by the situation that he also divorced my mother-in-law. Left without a place to go, she ended up at my ex-husband's place. Since I had been covering most of the living expenses, my ex-husband and mother-in-law struggled to manage their finances. They were running out of money and struggling to make ends meet, which was of no concern to me. Meanwhile, I'm enjoying my single life in my apartment. I recently adopted a cat and don't foresee dating anyone for the time being.